Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Southern California J70 webinar. We will take a few seconds to let everybody in, and then we'll get started. As we're waiting around, we encourage everybody to go online and pay your fleet dues. It's especially important now where, we're kind of in an idle period to keep the class going. I know Eric and I are both paid up, and hopefully all of you are as well. Today we're going to be talking about Upwind Trim. Eric, are you there? Where are you?
I'm here, man. I'm here in the mighty Midwest, my office of sorts. And yeah, looking forward to talking to everybody.
Cool. Well, thank you again, everybody, for joining us. We're going to dive right in. So this is a nice picture of a camber shot of a main. This is something that we use in sail making all the time. You actually, on a lot of big boat sails, you see on the foot of your Genoa or on your main, you see a picture of a camera. But I trim the main a lot, and this is a view that I'm pretty used to. And there are a few things that I like to look at while I am trimming. The first thing is the top telltale, kind of by the number 2 batten. And for some reason my annotator isn't working. But if you can see my mouse circling it, that's pretty much the primary indicator of what that'll tell me a lot about how closed off or how open my leech is. If it's flowing, obviously it's, flowing 100% of the time, it might be too open. If it's not flowing at all, it's probably too shut. In most conditions, you're looking for 50-50 braking. I also like to look at the depth of the sail by the J70 logo. And then I like to look at the top and bottom draft stripes, and I try and make them pretty similar. Eric, when you're kind of looking up at the main, what are some things that you tend to look at?
Yeah, like you said, how hard you can trim it. What I like about this sail is it looks very even top to bottom. You can see we got our horizontal speed wrinkles coming off the luff of the sail. The angle, the only thing that's a little funny about this picture, the angle of the Windex looks quite wide. It's just a snapshot in time, maybe going over a wave or something like that, but I kind of like to take a look at that as well. It's not a super tall rig on these boats, but it's a good indicator if there's some shear that looks a little wide, and if it was like that the whole time, then and the boat was very easy to accelerate on this tack and easy to hit your speeds. And likewise when you tack over onto port and it's narrower and it's harder to build, that would be something I take it upon myself to look at and make the skipper aware of that. Say, hey, it's coming out on port, it might take a long time to build, make sure you keep the bow down, it might be hard to reach the speed we want on port, and if the boat's easier to sail on starboard. But this is a nice looking setup right here. It looks like nice and powerful. Looks like a light air setup where we're looking to get power and get the boat up to speed.
Yeah, and one thing that I really like to think about too is, what am I trying to achieve with my leech? You think about it a lot of times I won't even pay that much attention to the telltale, and I'll think more, if it's bumpier and a little bit windier, I'd probably want to have flow more often. Yeah. So I'm thinking about having the leech a little bit more open. If it's flat water and 12 knots, then I can probably start to think about closing that leech up and really trying to take the height. So those are just some basic things that I think of, and I think is pretty applicable to the people who are attending this seminar. So here's a picture of Miami this past winter. We were both there. We saw all different types of conditions. On the left, that was maybe that Bacardi number 2 regatta that we did that wasn't so windy. Eric, you do a lot of jib trimming. What do you see in this picture on the left?
Picture on the left, I think that's our buddies, our our buddies on the Eat Sleep J, the world champion boat right there.
Wow, that's
Rory
good.
Scott, famous North Sails designer, and he's trimming the jib. I do a lot of that. He's down to leeward, checking out. You know, what's important here is obviously the slot. We're inhauling the boats more and more. We talk about, you know, lead position and inhaul, but really what we talk about is you know, the position of the clew on the cabin house. You know, how close to it gets, and then there's a reference that you know, there's a bit of non-skid on top, yeah, right in there, and where the clew is in relation to that, and how far inboard we pull it, and how tight we've got it trimmed on the spreader mark at the top. The previous photo with the main had some nice marks. You know, they need to be very clear, usually more than one, so you can have kind of an all-around mark. And then that looks pretty flat water, so you're ideally trying to point. We're trimming hard. We're doing a lot of inhauling while not stalling the boat too much and getting it going. So, you know, it all kind of works together too with the jib, you know, between the lead and the inhauler and the halyard tension and the forestay sag. So it's very important to get down there quite a bit and take a look at it, and to have good marks, you know, and the marks can't be on the jib sheet, can't be made out of tape. You know, they either got to be whipped on, sewn, or you know, with a magic marker that you reinforce every basically whenever they get hard to see. And they need to be on both sides of the boat too. You know, I always look down. It's pretty nice if you're trimmed to 6 on the leeward side, that the inhauler is roughly in the same position, about 6, and then you know when you tack over, you're kind of in the same mode, about the same number. You don't have to remember 6 and 2 or 3 and 4, something like that. You know, so they all need to kind of be, and some good marks on the halyard too, because it all goes hand in hand.
Yeah, on the halyard and on the mast as well.
Yeah.
I like to where that purchase is relative to my scale on the mast, and then I have, like, you know, for light air I have blue, for medium air I'll have a green one, and then for breeze I'll have a red one, you know, and try and I'm a little bit more color coded. And talk about making your scale though, Eric, in terms of, are you using numbers 1 to 10? Are you going, you know, sometimes you get on, you walk down the dock and you look at these boats and there's like 25 freaking numbers on the deck, and they're all over the place. And talk a little bit about how you actually build that scale. What do you typically use as a rule of thumb?
Yeah, we build the scale, we put it on the deck. Maybe you can point to that, Alex. It's
yeah,
you know, on the deck right there.
there.
You can see they've got something laid down. It's important to measure that. First, you know, it's one design boat, but it's critical at first to measure from the head stay to the jib track. Make sure the tracks are in the same spot, side to side. Builders sometimes are a little dubious about that. And then to measure back from that track and find a spot, because they, you know, some people measure from the blocks forward and they end up being in different spots, but that's the best way to do it. And I usually do a scale 1 to 10 every ½ inch, same on each side, and tighter trim is a bigger number for me, just to make it simple. So start from the front, 1 to 10. And it's really helpful to just get a little needle and thread, or get a rigger, somebody to whip a little mark into the sheet itself. You know, don't do it with a brand new sheet because the cover stretches relative to the core, but get one, you know, after you use it 4 or 5 days, put a little mark on it, whip it on there. And then every time you go to the boat, boom, your marks are there. You got the same spot. It's really nice. And just do it on the deck, equal on both sides.
Yeah. Yeah. And, you know, I trim the main. So some things that I do in light air is, you know, first is getting I really have the traveler in really 2 spots, or maybe 3, but it's either in light air, it's all the way up, and then boom, kind of center line with the main sheet. And I always have the main sheet in my hand. I always like to sit forward of the winch, or in light air all the way up against the cabin. But I'm adjusting main sheet first, and then probably Cunningham, and then traveler, and then vang. So that's kind of my order of operations in light air. As it gets breezier, I might adjust the vang first. You know, because it's a deck step mast and the slot is so narrow and the jibs are high aspect, you really can't do a lot of traveler adjustment like you would, say, an Etchells or, you know, a displacement keel boat. So you're primarily adjusting your main sheet, your vang, your Cunningham, and then probably your traveler last. You know, you just want to get it into a good ballpark place where you can have a consistent rate of heel as it gets windier. And then in breeze, I like to have it, you know, 1 car length above center line just to provide a little bit of twist. And then depending on the sea state, if it's flat water, I'll use more vang. If it's really bumpy, not really using a lot of vang, but playing the main sheet kind of a lot. And you can see on the right, this is probably from the midwinters. The photo on the right is of the Imperia. They were top 5 at this past year at the midwinters, and Z Korwitz of North Sails Annapolis and Ian Coleman and world champion Will Felder, and then John Heaton does the driving. But you can see that his traveler's a little bit above center line. He's vanged pretty hard. The bottom of the main is pretty flat. That is one thing that, you know, we have a good debate within our North Sail group. You know, you talk to these guys in North Sails Italy, and we'll see a couple pictures a little later on, but they vang the crap out of the boat. And we don't really see that here in America, but it's starting to become a little bit more of a trend, especially in the flat water venues. For those of you who sail in Santa Barbara or maybe go to South Bay and nice afternoon breeze gets up 14, 15 knots, you might consider vanging a little bit just to make the bottom of the main a little flatter. We did have a question from Scott Deerdorf. And we certainly encourage everybody to send in their questions, and we'll do our best to answer them. But I don't know the answer to this. Eric, what are these 2 bottom telltales doing in the second panel of the main?
Wow, yeah, that's something new. That's Rory. He's a designer, you know. Designers are a little bit out there, and they've got different things they got to try. And he's probably just, you know, trying to figure out where it stalls back there. To me, it would probably be, I mean, the weather side would probably always flow, but that's where it comes from. You know, he's kind of a mad scientist guy, but he's world champion, you know, so we can't really question too much.
Can't argue with that.
It's good. It's a very astute pickup there, Scott. Nice call.
So here we go. We got 2 different shots, probably both in Miami, lighter air. We'll start with the picture on the left. What are some things that stick out to you, Eric?
Beautiful day. Very nice day. Super flat water. So they're trimmed pretty hard. They're almost looks like they could inhaul just a little bit more. It's just a funky boat, you know, because what stands out, I've been looking at a lot of different boats lately, and just how wide the sheeting angle, and the jib just looks too far out, you know, on a J70. If you didn't do any inhauling at all, it's way out there. It's at like 14 degrees or something like that. It's a big number. And just to give everybody a relative idea, you know, TP52s and boats like that, they can sheet inside like 4 degrees. So the inhauling is kind of a natural progression. And they looks like they inhaul a little more. Boat on the left is trying to develop power. You know, everybody's not hike max. It's they're in the boat a little bit, trying to get just a little bit of heel to induce a little bit of rudder angle. Rudder is nice. You know, any little helm you can get there is going to help develop lift. They're sheet quite hard, you know, compared to the boat on the right. Boat on the right is a little fuller, a little more twisted. Might be a little more wind. Looks pretty nice too, though. You know, neutral helm, nice angle of heel. You see the Windex on the boat. Windex on the boat on the left. This is the same day as that other picture. Look, it's got sheer. See how narrow it is? Except the guy on the right. His is quite wide. I don't know what he's reaching, maybe.
Yeah. He had to reset. He hit a couple bad waves. Rodney went by, and he had to ease everything back out. Coach caught him at a bad time. Yeah, so I mean, I agree with you completely. It looks like from a main perspective, obviously a little bit more twisty. You can note the boom above center line. You know, if you're sailing in Marina Del Rey and it's pretty choppy and light air, you might have your boom just slightly above center line. or if you're trying to develop power. Those are kind of the two instances. But yeah, I mean, a few times this winter I went and drove the boat, and I don't know what feels worse to drive, and Etchells or a J70. You know, in Etchells you're like pulling with two arms and you can't really control the helm, and you know, J70 you're like, I have no feedback. What are some things that you look for from your helmsman in terms of feedback to give you as a trimmer?
Yeah, I mean, like I said, in light air, it's you know, the boat's woefully underpowered in the front, right? It's got a very small head sail. We're trying to get helm. We're trying to get some feel, and the skipper's gotta understand that it's a tough duty, especially when you come around the bottom mark and there's, you know, 30 boats coming downwind and you're going through that chop, and that's a good time to just you know, take a deep breath, put the hiking stick down on the deck, and not try and steer so much, you know, because sawing along is just the worst thing you can do. And you end up sawing even up in 12, 14, 15 knots, you know. The boats can be happy. It's just going to feel terrible. It's just one of those things. So just put the hiking stick down on the deck, help the boat go straight, and then we get into a little more open water. We got to remember, we want the boat to do the work. We want to set the boat up so that it's minimal steering, you know, that the boat is in balance. It's not got too much helm, certainly, you know, in the upper ranges. And then really when it gets really windy, that the boat doesn't have lee helm. You know, it goes all the way the other way around. That in the breeze, you end up flattening the main so much so that the boat doesn't tip over too much and the jib takes over. So we got to make sure the boat doesn't have lee helm. You know, if it comes to it, you have to end up easing the jib a little bit. But, you know, the feedback from the skipper is super critical. It's so helpful to the trimmers. You know, they can give the idea of if they're doing something right or wrong. You know, everybody's got to pay attention and, you know, watch the speedo and watch the sails, make sure that the boat is doing the work and we're not doing so much steering. And the fact is, with a J70, unlike say an Etchells or a Star or something like that, you can't adjust a lot. You can't adjust the shrouds once the race has started. So there's going to be times where you kind of guess wrong, right? When is that sea breeze going to come pumping in Santa Barbara? I don't know. Is it going to be on the first beat or the second beat? You might get caught with the shrouds way too loose, and you can't pull the backstay on because the main just turns inside out. So you're just kind of lugging it. And I think as everybody's on the same page, then you understand, hey, this race is going to be a struggle to the end. Let's just do the best we can, you know, or likewise, the breeze just dies and the boat's just woefully underpowered and you got no helm when you should. So, you know, recognizing that, or if it's a puffy situation, you say, hey, look, we're going to go in like a middle of the road setup here, you know, and it's something good to talk about at the end of the day too. Hey, we were good in the puffs. We were bad in the lulls, really felt sticky. You know, how do we change that? Oh, well, we got caught with the rig a little too tight, or we got, you know, something like that. So I think if everybody's heads up and notices that kind of little subtleties, it's really going to help the program quite a bit, you know, talk about it.
And I think you touched on a really important thing. If you're not getting a lot of feedback from your helm and you're kind of, you know, George, he's on this call. George sails with Pat Toole. I'm sure George has sometimes looked at Pat and said, Pat, well, you got to tell me what's going on back there. Well, if you're not getting the feedback that you want, you got to also be observant to take a look back at the helm. And if you look back and the tiller's just on the other side of the boat, a guy's pushing really hard, tons of lee helm, then you got to make some adjustments. Or if he's pulling really hard to weather, you probably need to take a little bit of power out of the boat. So, you know, the helm should always be balanced all the time, and crew needs to encourage the skipper to chat a little bit more. And now that's not to say that the skipper is looking around and trying to figure out what to do. They still need to do their job and drive the boat, but you know, it is the helm's responsibility to really give the crew feedback, and it's the crew's responsibility to get on the skipper and make sure, you know, that that he's giving him all the right info. So we have 2 questions coming in, one from Pat Toole. So he's asking, if the wind drops and 5 going to 4 knots, what are you looking for in trim? Pat, you're just trying, as the breeze gets lighter, you're looking to put more power in the boat. So that's a halyard off, maybe a little bit on the jib, maybe a little bit of traveler up, put a little bit more twist in the boat, bow down, and really press on it and see, you know, he and I have been talking about the right speedo for his boat. And that's why you have a speedo, is you got to make sure that, you know, when to shift gears. So when are you accelerating? When is it time to trim everything back in and get going again? When is the speed crashing? When you need to let sails out, make things fuller, adjust the halyard. So like, for example, if you're sailing really puffy conditions and you go from like 18 knots to 8 knots, when you let the backstay off, that pushes the draft too far forward in the jib. So the jib trimmer needs to be fast enough. Okay, or the main trimmer communicates, big lull, let the backstay all the way off. The jib trimmer is like, okay, the jib's too flat, let's make it a little fuller. I'm going to ease some halyard and maybe adjust the inhaul and the leeward sheet a little bit. So that's kind of what we're looking for. And Pat, to answer your other questions, what would you expect to have the upper main leech telltales in light air? You're pretty much full flow, you know, 75% flow until you start to get some bodies on the rail, or you really have some power to lean against it, and then you can trim it back in and get to like 50-50. Would you agree with that, Eric?
Yeah, for sure. And one thing I think it's important for people to know as well, you know, again, we don't have adjustable jib tracks on the boat. We can't, it's hard to do it in a straight line without tacking. So the halyard plays a huge role. You know, when the wind drops, like you said, you got to make the jib fuller. If you don't have power, you got to make the jib fuller. And the best way to do that is to ease the jib halyard, because it just makes the hole so you can just look at it. If you've never done it, get on the leeward side, ease the jib halyard like an inch and a half, and watch how much further away from the boat the jib gets. It just gets fuller. But what you have to remember, since we're adjusting at the top, it's a powerful tool, because if you drop it an inch, it's basically like moving, it drops the clew of the jib as well. So that's like moving the lead aft. So you've got to actually trim the jib in, and vice versa. If a big puff comes and the jib's too full, and you pull the jib halyard on 2 inches to get the wrinkles out of the luff that you've made, it's like moving the lead forward. It's like trimming the jib on. So you actually have to ease the jib sheet a little bit. It's a little counterintuitive in that you ease in the lulls and you ease in the puffs and you trim in the lulls, but you got to remember, every time you adjust the halyard, you probably got to adjust the sheet as well. You know, it's super powerful. And I tell you, it's pretty nice. You know, on our boat, we kind of just leave the jib lead, you know, in the extreme conditions, it goes to that 5.5 hole. In doubt, we're at the 6. And when it gets pretty breezy, we might move it to 6.5, because the halyard and the clew move around so much during the race, and it's pretty powerful.
Let's move on here. This is our good buddy Giulio, North Sails Italy, and his team. So we just elaborated on the fact that those guys love to use vang, and you can see that in this profile here. The bottom of the main is really flat, the middle is really flat, the head's pretty flat. They like to sail with a little bit of twist. Looks like their traveler is just above center line with the main sheet a little bit out. The thing that really sticks out to me in the main is they actually have their outhaul not board flat. You know, there is a little bit of shape in the very bottom of the main, and that'll help control that lower draft stripe. We did a little bit of sailing in Monaco this past year, and when it really got windy, you want to pull the outhaul on, but then as soon as you start to make the jib more round, or maybe use less inhaul, or maybe you push the lead back forward to not lose the top part of the jib, you got to adjust the bottom part of the main as well. So you actually end up easing the outhaul just a little bit. And you want to try and get the bottom of the main and the bottom of the jib to look pretty similar, so that way you have similar profiles. What about the jib, Eric? What's your feeling on their trim on the jib? You know, it looks like they got a pink tiller, so they must be pretty quick. But what are some other things that stick out to you?
It's got to match the life jackets. No, I think you nailed it with the getting the bottom of the main to look like the bottom of the jib. You know, these jibs look really nice. They've got a little bit of inhauler on, so it's got a little bit of shape. You look at the bottom stripe of the main, the bottom stripe of the jib, and you see the exit angles are very, very similar. And that's what you want. You want to balance the boat out nicely. You know, the picture on the left is almost on center line, but we can just see a little bit of the leeward side of the main at the bottom batten and the jib. Look at that. So we'll probably see about 3-4 inches of the leeward side of both of those sails. So it's very even. So to me, it looks very balanced. And you can see from their helm, the tiller is just in the middle. And she's got it sitting on the deck. Really nice. The boat, to me, has a nice angle of heel. You know, it's firm backstay because the lower D1s are snug and the uppers are swinging a little bit. Nice twist. You know, these guys, and they've got the sails looking really nice and the boat looking nice and balanced. So probably not as quick as those kite boarders on the left.
No, I think that's probably Garda on the left and maybe Sardinia on the right, something like that. Those guys work really hard on their sail development. I know they use the radial main for a really long time. Only recently did they switch over to this crosscut main, and you know, they're really fast. They're one of the top teams in the world, and they sail with 5, and they got a badass chick driver. So, you know, especially there's a lot of guys in our local fleet that are relatively new to the class. And if you're relatively new to driving the boat, and no matter where you sail, you should really get comfortable with this frying pan technique. You know, we like to make fun of Chris Rabb all the time, but Rabb is actually really good at driving, and he always has the tiller just pinned all the way to the deck. And sometimes if it's super choppy, he'll actually sit on it slightly. So, you know, this is a technique that we would encourage you to try. And if you're a crew on some of these guys' boats, you know, just yell at them to fry and pan. I sail with a guy, Fabian, who's from Mexico, lives in Coronado, and he goes, I will not try your frying pan technique at Mr. Alex. I will be the best driver in the world with it putting on my lap. And finally I said, dude, can you just try it? And then all of a sudden we picked up like 2/10. And he's like, okay, Mr. Alex, you are right. And it's like, all right. So moving on here. Oh, we got a couple of questions flowing in. C. Claudia, is this Claudia Rossi, John Pickney? Yes, that is Claudia. You got a crush on her, John?
John has a crush on her, huh?
Yeah, exactly. They're heavier than everyone. Yes, that is because they sail with the 5.
They sail where it's friggin' windy too.
So here's Zeke again. He's looking to leeward. You know, that's not very good technique. Hopefully he's not racing. But you know, what do you think he's looking at, Eric?
Yeah, he's trying to control everything, right? Main trimmer looking at the jib. That's just the jib trimmer's worst nightmare, right? He's just saying, "What are you doing with my jib?" Oh, and he has freaking Will on board. Will, world champion. Unbelievable. He doesn't trust Will.
Right.
No. He's just checking out. Very important. Got to look to leeward every now and then. And then one thing I just want to clarify on this picture, shows it very nice where the jib lead goes. Basically, we're usually what we call in the number 6 hole. And they don't always put the jib tracks on the same way on the J70. Like sometimes they're backwards and sometimes they're correct. But the forward hole is usually the forward bolt. There's a factory bolt that holds the front of the track. If the track's backwards, I think there's 3 holes in front. If the track's correctly, there's only 2. But so we start counting from that bolt. And then we count the factory holes that came with the drill. And we count back, there's like 4, then there's another bolt, and then there's 2 more. And that's the number 6 hole. And that's usually where we start. And like I said, so Zeke's checking that out. And we said, we might go forward from that just a little bit. 1/2 hole or maybe a hole a hole one. You know, a lot of times we will drill holes in between the factory holes because they're about 1 inch apart, and it's nice to have that little 1/2 inch or so. So we'll just drill a hole. Be careful if you do it on the boat that you don't go all the way through. We'll go 1/2 hole, you know, 1/2 hole, maybe 1 hole forward to the 5 hole, and then maybe we go back 6.5, and maybe extreme breeze, but flat water where we're inhauling a lot, you know, we'll go to 7 and pull hard, you know. And then so he's looking at the relative position of the clue and where the leech is, checking everything out. Got to get back on the rail here.
Yeah.
Soon.
Yeah, and you know, I have to say I'm a little bit of a micromanaging main trimmer myself, and
Oh, Alex.
you know, when you're trimming the main, you got to look up at the main and, you know, take a snapshot in your head before you go and you look at the jib. So that way you can get a feeling for, are the profiles pretty similar? I actually think that this bottom draft stripe, this 4th draft stripe, is super important because it shows you the curvature of the foot. And, you know, I've seen a lot of people, or one thing that I've thought about during this off time is potentially putting a 4th draft stripe on the main and trying to get the 2 profiles to look pretty similar, draft stripe to draft stripe. So Eric, I'm going to have to consult you on where the placement should be, but that is something that I'm thinking about and would encourage other people to, if you don't have this draft stripe, try and figure out a way to get one. And if you do, start to use it more often. The draft stripes are on the sale for a reason. So a couple more questions flowing in. Mr. Bruce, no. Okay, there's interesting that there's no Cunningham. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe he hasn't quite figured out the main. He's too busy micromanaging the jib to really be paying attention to the Cunningham. But I don't know. That's for Zeke. So here we go. This is just, we're looking kind of at crew positions here, and there's a lot going on in each of these 3 pictures, but this is light air. You can see a little bit about their jib. You know, the first place where my eyes always go are the clue relative to the cuddy and where they positioned, and then are people on the rail. Generally, once people get on the rail, then you can start to think about inhauling all the way to the cabin cuddy. Is that the case? Would you agree with that assessment, Eric?
Yeah, we always have a little bit of inhauler on, and then as people come up on the rail, you can go more and more. It's basically determined by the speed. You know, you see the picture 1 there. They got the Italian aft lean going. You know, I don't know. Maybe that makes them look faster. They feel faster. It's not very windy. It's nice. Everybody's crammed way forward in the cockpit. You know, that's what you need. Main trimmer's in front of the winch. Jib trimmer's doing his job. He's doing some trimming in this picture number 2. You know, everybody's still forward. They're obviously looking for more power. Everybody's leaning back in the boat a little bit, inside to get a little bit of heel. You know, main trimmer actually inside, not sitting on the deck. Still inhaul pretty hard. You know, look at that clue relative to the cabin top. And then you can also see in that picture, another telltale that's light, see how loose the lowered shroud is, the D1 on the other picture one. The other one. Look at this one. Look at that. That thing's just swinging in the breeze. They got no backstay on. They're trying to develop helm. The outhaul's ease. There's no Cunningham. The jib's round in the bottom. Cruise in. It's max. You know, the vang's probably slack. And everybody's still forward in the boat, you know. It's very important, the fore and aft weight, too, that the forward bow person is always got his, you know, pressed right up against that forward stanchion that's right behind the shrouds, and the other crew is right behind him. And then as the wind comes up and it starts getting choppier, then you start sliding back a little bit. And actually, you know, the teams that are well practiced, they'll be forward all the time, and they'll slide back in sets of waves, you know, like 6 inches to like a body width back. When it's really windy, you slide back quite a bit more, so there's water not coming over the bow. But it's everybody's obligation on the boat to understand the weight position. You know, the guys in the front should know it, should be doing it on their own. But if the boat feels like you know, it's bouncing a little too much, or the bow can't get up over the waves, you know, the skipper can say, hey, let's try sliding back, you know, 8 inches or something like that, and just be consistent every time. But these guys are.
Yeah, and if you look at photo number 3, the main trimmer sitting behind the winch, this is actually a relatively new phenomenon, even if you're sailing with 4 as the breeze comes up. You know, if it's really bumpy and kind of windy, and, you know, the bow guy is like, you know, I'm always asking the bow guy how much of the bow is going into the water. Is it 50-50? Are we 100% knuckle in? Are we all the way out? So if the bow is digging too much and it's windy and choppy, the main trimmer should look to shift back. The owner of that boat, though, in number 3, I mean, he has no regard for his crew, especially his main trimmer. He doesn't even have any protection on the winch. He just wants him to break his tailbone, I think. But I would not fly by me. But also all the skippers have tiller on the deck, so you know they're going fast, and it's just really nice look. So medium air, a couple of different setups. Again, Eric, have you ever sailed with 5? I sailed once and it was not so good.
Shoot, it's hard enough with 4 in that little cockpit. It's like the freaking Three Stooges in an FJ, man. 5, whoo, gotta be little bitty people.
Yeah, that sounds terrible.
No, it's not. It doesn't. Could have made the boat just a little bit wider. But a couple different looks here. You know, everybody's trimming hard. Backstay starting to come on. Angle of heel is nice. Jib at the bottom is a good example of just enough luff tension. You can just see the wrinkles on the forestake. Really nice. It's good. Everybody's, you know, got sheets in their hand. You can see the jib trimmer on the bottom. He's poised. He's ready to make an adjustment. You know, main trimmers, they don't have anything else to do. They have to have the main sheet in their hand. That's what they're there for. But good setups here. This is probably the most, you know, the boat's powered up. You've got enough power, and you're working on the balance of the boat. You haven't quite reached super overpowered where it's more about angle of heel. But nice, you know, again, and Alex mentioned it, you know, the knuckle. Look at the bow of all 3 of these pictures. The crews are far forward and the knuckle is in the water. That's really nice. Maximizing your waterline, getting the boat to go through the water with a good motion. That's important in this. Good looking venues.
Yeah,
as soon as go sailing there. Yeah,
maybe one day. Once we get rid of this coronavirus, we'll go over there and try and have some fun. Nice. But, you know, as soon as guys start to get on the rail, and especially if you're sailing in a puffy venue, South Bay especially, Long Beach, maybe, you know, a little bit steadier in Long Beach, but it's all about angle of heel. And, you know, there was a few guys who did some testing, you know, 5-6 years ago about when the keel stops working on a J70, and it was something crazy. It was only like 15 degrees of heel, and then the boat starts to go sideways. And I'm a big proponent, I like to have a level gauge. You know, a lot of the B&G system tells you heel angle, but if you just get a good old fashioned little pendulum deal that tells you what the heel angle is, I just really like steady heel all the time. And you're looking for, you know, 9 degrees of heel as soon as you start to feel overpowered. I think that's kind of a really magic number. And you'll notice it gets to a point where you, rather than trying to just keep the bow down and the telltales, you know, pinned against the sail, where it's all about controlling the balance of the boat and controlling the power of the boat and controlling the heel angle and getting the boat to stay up, you know, basically sail upright and track forward. If you get into a speed lineup where, you know, one guy is making minimal adjustments, everything's pretty dialed in, you know, he's comfortable with his settings, and he's just going angle of heel only, versus a guy who's searching a little bit, you know, maybe using too much backstay, or they're not quite in the right rig setup, or too tight or too loose, then the boat becomes unbalanced and they heel way over or get too flat, then they're probably not going to go as well as just the boat that,
that's the main sheet trimmer's fault. It's always the main sheet trimmer's fault. That's
true. That's why I get yelled at sometimes. But it is important to understand. Like if you're sailing in Santa Barbara, you know, you tack off the line, you got to go right. It's all about being fast in a straight line on port there, and you know, you gotta get comfortable with understanding when balance is more important than power, and when power is more important than balance. And that kind of leads us right into our next slide. This is strong wind or big breeze. And, you know, you can see how much the mast is bending here, how the main's going inside out. What are some things that you kind of do right away? What are the first 3 things that you do to your boat when it gets super windy, setup-wise?
Okay, so we got big breeze here. Just maybe real quick, we'll address John Pickney asking about the jib design, because it kind of, maybe we go back to that other slide, because we have quite a lot more in-haul now. And, you know, originally the jibs were max leech length. And as we started in-hauling more and more, you know, the cabin house was in the way. So we do offer 2 jibs right now. One is kind of the original jib that we had, you know, from day one, except it's quite a bit shorter on the leech. And, you know, in order to keep the sail maximum size, you know, if you go measure the sail, it's not max. So as the clew goes up, the girths go up. So the sail got a little bigger up high. And that's the J2 high clew, we call it. That sail's, it's a nice all-purpose jib, a little bit rounder in the back, a little bit less critical to the in-haul. Then we have a J6, which is the same. It's shorter on the leeches. And the leeches just recently got shorter again, because we are, it kind of goes into the next question on the chat, is the headstay length, because we are sailing with more and more rake. And it's basically because the mains have gotten flatter. And as the main gets flatter and the in-haul comes on more, we're loading the front of the boat more, and we're taking it out of the back. So in order to balance the boat more, we're sailing with more rake, you know. So that makes sense to everybody. If you have any question on that, just sing out in the chat room, right? So if we make the main flatter, we're going to unload the helm, which might be just unloading it correctly to what we need, but then we're going to add some rake to get it back. You know, and as you in-haul the boat more and more in the front, you're adding power to the front, unloading the back. You know, they kind of go hand in hand. So the questions are jib design. We still have the original J2, the J6, a little more draft, a little bit rounder in the front, draft down low, forward, a little fuller, a little bit straighter in the back for you know, flatter venues that you really want to in-haul hard, you know, most of the time. And then, yeah, a little bit more rake. So
what rake are you running now, Eric?
God, this shows about you caught me. I haven't done my homework here.
I run like 55 1/4. That's kind of my number recently. And a few years ago is when I really got aggressive. I was sailing with Tara Layton in Newport, and we were chartered the old Flojito, and we set the boat up, and Willem Van Way had set it up before, and I asked him what the rake was, and he said it's like 55. At that point, that was pretty rake back, and we went out, and I was like, wow, this is really fast. And ever since then, you know, if there's any question about whether or not we could get quicker, I just try adding a little bit more rake. And tends to, you know, just puts helm in the boat. We were talking about feedback, giving helmsman feedback earlier. You know, that's best if you rake the boat aft, that puts more helm in the boat. If you rake it forward, it takes helm out of the boat. So if you don't feel like you have a ton of helm and feel like maybe you can get away with a little bit more, I would encourage you to try 1/4 inch and 1/2 inch and just see where you're at. If you're at the 54 1/2, I would encourage you to try 55 the next time you go sailing. I think it's like 8 turns off on the headstay. I want to say it's 4 turns for 1/4 inch. So if you go 8 turns off on the headstay, they'll kind of put you pretty close. And if you feel like there's still a little bit more to be gained, then definitely, you know, try another 2, 3 turns. And
I've got my wet notes, man. I'm going to find this. McLean's giving me a hard time. But
I mean, it's good. I would encourage people to go for it and rake aft and see. It's nice, especially once you start inhauling.
Yeah, 50. It's actually 56 and a quarter.
From the top pin?
Yeah.
Wow.
A lot of rig.
So you're even more than me.
Yeah.
All right. Well,
that's
I'm
what
gonna
those
try like
guys.
10 more
That's
times.
what they won the midwinters at too. It's a big number now.
The Vineyard Vines guys.
Yeah. Yeah.
And they run the J6. So yeah.
Yeah, but the
So
dimensions
definitely go to
are the same.
55.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, so here we go. Strong wind. Eric, you started to touch on some of the things that stuck out to you. One, the things that stick out to me is, you start to see some overbend wrinkles in the main. You basically want, you want to pull on enough backstay to make the boat feel balanced, but you don't want to have this big ugly crease. If you do get a lot of overbend wrinkles, you need to be tighter on your lowers.
Yeah.
The lowers will tighten the headstay, push the middle of the mast forward, and make it straighter. And then your overbend wrinkles will go away. This look in picture 2 in the main, I hate that look. And we saw that so much in San Francisco Bay, the main's turning inside out. So it means kind of 2 things to me. It looks like the jib trimmer could be hiking a little bit harder. It looks like the forward guy could probably be hiking a little bit harder. The main trimmer and the driver need to be pressed up all the way against the lifeline. And it should almost like hurt. But at the end of the day, if your back doesn't hurt from pushing your back into lifelines, you got to push harder. And that'll help the healing a little bit. But maybe the jib might be over trimmed and the slot's too narrow. But you always want to catch this look in picture 2, where if you start to hear the main go inside out, you just pull on the main sheet once to pop the battens correctly. Maybe you add a little bit more vang and then ease back out. But Ed Adams told me one time, he said if your battens are inverted or your main is flogging, it's 3/10 of a knot slower or 4/10 of a knot slower than if you catch the break. So main trimmers need to really be paying attention to that. And if it's flogging too much, or the main's turning inside out too much, then your jib's probably over trimmed, or you need to move your lead back and use more inhaul to push the twist up higher. So those are kind of 2 remedies to kind of get rid of that look. What are some things that stand out to you, Eric?
Yeah, I mean, looking at these pictures, in this picture number 1 here, the sail, he got caught with the rig a little loose. I think if I was sailing upwind like that before the start, the first thing I'd do, I'd probably try putting another full turn on the lowers, right? Because the shroud base is quite low, far aft in a J70. Look at the angle of the spreaders. They're swept back like, I think it's 36 degrees or something like that. It's a pretty big number. So, and the shroud base is far behind the mast. So the lowers restrict the middle of the mast bending. So if you start to get too big an overbend wrinkle there, you got to do whatever you can to flatten the main, because the boat's way overpowered. It's a light little boat, has a small little bulb, not a lot of riding moment. Boat's quite narrow. So we're trying to flatten the main as much as we can. So we're trying to put a lot of backstay on, or we're gonna put a lot of Cunningham on, and then put enough vang that the main doesn't turn inside out, but we've got control of the bottom of the sail. So when the breeze comes up, you got to be very very methodical about how you put your turns on on your steps, on your shrouds. And if you run into a little trouble, don't be afraid to do an extra turn on the lowers. If it lets you get a little more backstay on, then that's probably a really good thing. You can see in this picture number 2, that boat 58, how much he's heeling over. The picture on the bottom, the angle of heel on 54 looks just awesome. There's our Italian with the pink team again, Claudia. She sails the boat nice and flat. That does a lot of good things. It's the foils working efficiently, eliminates leeway. Boat in the middle, the 01, he looks good too. Everybody's still forward on the rail, which is probably a sign that it's not too bumpy. The 60, he's just on the verge there. You can see we can see the transom coming up out of the water. So that's we're on the verge there. You know, the 54 boat too, how much the transom gets out of the water. And actually, you know, it puts, well, the 54 in the number 2 picture.
Sorry.
Just getting out of the water there. So, you know, that's bad. We're just starting to get air under the hull, perhaps around the keel. All not good things. So, you know, there comes that time, like Alex said, where the breeze comes up and you're just sailing angle to heel. You can see in picture number 1, the 81 boat, look at the windward telltale on the jib. It looks to me like it's lifting quite strong. And there she's feathering to keep the boat, try and keep the boat flat. And, you know, there comes a point where you got to do that. It's all about angle of heel, but you'd rather push that up higher by making the sails flatter, by, you know, making sure we've got the shrouds tight enough, we got enough backstay on, right? We've adjusted the bridle in the back of the boat on the backstay, right? We've got that just as tight as we can get it while the, you know, the backstay's off, and that keeps the angle very efficient the harder we pull down on it. And it's that last little bit that really makes a big difference. We can get more leverage and get as much backstay on as we can. Makes a huge difference in the J70. And
Huge.
you gotta really pay attention on a puffy day. It's hard to do, but as a jib trimmer, you know, you got to be able to ease that sheet in the big puffs. If you ease just before the puff hits and the main doesn't go inside out, and the other guy's main goes inside out, you're going to gain a couple, 2-3 feet, you know, maybe even half a length. If the guy's down there flogging and his main's inside out, inside out, inside out, it's just drag, right? The main's flopping and it's pulling the boat to leeward. It's unbalancing the boat. It's making the bow go down. So it probably has to push the tiller up. So, you know, don't be afraid to ease that jib in big wind, you know. If it helps the main, it's helping everything, you know, super important. And then you got to get it right back on. So it's hard work, you know, but you can see this guy on the 81 boat here, he's got the sheet in his hand. He's working on it. So yeah, everybody's got to work together.
To build off of your point about the backstay, you know, you see a lot, especially here in our local fleet, we see a lot of fancy ways to have the bridle. You got the splice and whatnot. You gotta just make sure that you have enough throw, and you gotta make sure that you're able to get the jib or that gross tune tight enough. So I just have a low friction ring spliced onto one of the legs. I always keep it on the starboard side. In light air, there's probably a 1.5 foot of gap in between the low friction ring and the bottom, maybe even more, maybe 2 feet. I always err on the side of being able to get tighter. And because the worst feeling in the world is when it's blowing 25 knots and you're at max, you know, you're at max tension and you're still not able to get the backstay on tight enough. So really you got to screw all the fancy rope stuff, just make it simple, make it easy to adjust. And you're going to be really thankful when you're sailing Long Beach Race Week and it's blowing 25. So a couple of questions here from John. What are your upper and lower tensions at in 20 to 25 knots? You know, the magic number for a long time was like 7 and 7, 8 and 8. You wind up being like 26 or 27 on the caps, 29, maybe just touching 30 on the lowers. That's pretty generic, I would say. And then Scott Deerdorf has a question. Do you play the backstay and breeze more or less than the main sheet? I'd say you're playing the main sheet more, unless you're in a really puffy venue. But if your backstay should be in a ballpark area, and you should be able to control a lot of the power with the main sheet. The thing that you want to, you know, it's really hard to do in big breeze, but you want to make sure that there's enough shape in the main. It's not just board flat. So, you know, it might take a few micro adjustments just to get within the range, but, you know, you do want to have a little bit of shape to help you punch through the chop. Chances are, if it's really windy, there's probably some chop unless it's coming directly offshore. But those are just some things that I look for. But main sheet is always first priority. So we're kind of wrapping up here. Does anybody have any questions? you know, we've covered a lot. We've talked about upwind trim. We didn't even talk really about downwind sailing at all. And it seems like, you know, we've got a pretty good turnout here. Eric and I have done these local seminars for Etchells, some Etchells fleets on the East Coast. And I've done a few for just local Newport one design classes, and we've gotten, you know, 20 people. And if there is enough of a response to this to do a downwind one, Eric and I would be more than happy to do it. Obviously, now we're all in that email thread, and you now have both of our emails in case you didn't have it before. Alex.curtis@northsails.com, Eric.Doyle@northsails.com. We're both local guys, and we're happy to help out guys in our local area. Eric, you got anything you want to leave the people with? Some advice on life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness? What's going on in your world right now?
Get out there and sail. No, thanks. Just don't hesitate to email us any questions you want anytime. We'll answer them.
Cool. And for those of you guys who haven't seen, if you go on the North Sails YouTube page, we've been doing a J70 chat almost every single week, you know, with some of the best insights from some of the best people in the world. We really encourage you to go and take advantage of that library. There will be another J70 webinar next Monday, I think, right, Eric? Or a week from Monday? What is the schedule for that?
I'm looking. June 1st, next Monday.
So next Monday, we will be having another one, and hope you guys enjoyed it and learned something. Thanks, Eric.
All right, bye, you guys. Thank you.